how toxic people apologize or don't really apologize. Their version of apology, right? That is to a good, kind, loving, giving, and forgiving person would not be an apology. Okay, so hi guys, Sarah K Ramsey here to help you find love and success after a toxic relationship so you can bounce back better. And I want to talk to you about when you tell the toxic person that they did something, or that you're upset about something, or you caught them in something, and what happens after that. Because what you would love is a "I'm sorry, I won't do it again," and what you usually get is something else, right? So you've all talked, you all heard me talk about the flip, right? Which is when they flip everything back on you and make it your fault and make you the problem. So that is definitely a very popular and frustrating technique, is when you say, "Hey, I noticed you were doing this," and they flip it and say, "Why were you in my stuff? Why were you messing with me? Why don't you trust me? Why don't you worry about your own problems?" Okay, that's very popular for toxic people to do. Now, what's interesting is, how they can even be sneakier and say, "Okay, well, okay, you know, all these little crazy things that they say that isn't an apology," but it's usually the flip. It's usually avoiding responsibility, and it's usually putting the responsibility back on you. Or they may say, "Well, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings," or, "I'm surprised you're upset about that." It's not them saying, "I shouldn't have done that. I take responsibility." And very often they will flip into hero mode. And so they get caught or they get in trouble. And instead of, changing, because an apology without changed behavior is manipulation. An apology without changed behavior is manipulation, okay? Even if they do say, "I'm sorry," but then they keep doing the behavior, that was just a manipulation tactic. That was just to get you off their back. Now, I'm reading a book called The Gift of Fear, and listen to an audiobook. It's a great book about how women can protect themselves. And what's interesting is how rarely women straight up look someone in the face and say, "Are you doing this? Did you do this? Have you ever done this to a woman before?" He even used the example of someone who interviewing babysitters, and he said, "We all want to keep our kids safe, but how many people have looked at a babysitter in the face and said, 'Have you ever abused children before?'" And that he talked about the example that they would come back and say, "What do you mean by abuse?" And I was like, oh, it just made me feel like I'd been punched in the stomach thinking about my babies. But toxic people do that all the time. Like, "Have you ever cheated on anyone before?" "What do you mean by cheating?" Right? It's a different kind of twist. It's not really a flip where it flips it back on you, but it's a twist. And they try to make their actions okay to avoid taking responsibility for things. Where they say, "Your feelings are the problem. You being upset is the problem. You being too sensitive is the problem." Their actions are never the problem. And it feels like madness. It feels like, oh my gosh, why won't they just admit what's happening? It feels almost like you've got water that you're trying to catch in your hands and it keeps slipping through your fingers because they are so good at avoiding responsibility. But I really, 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 really advise you to look at it as them avoiding responsibility, because we hear all these words like crazy making, and and it is crazy making. It feels like we're going crazy. But when you think about, okay, they are trying to avoid responsibility of taking responsibility for their actions, that's very simple. Now, they may use the flip and make it your fault. They may twist things around, like, "What do you mean? What do you mean? How do you define cheating?" Which, again, puts the work back on you. Or, "Why were you looking at my stuff? Why can't you trust me? You have trust issues." They can turn everything around on you very easily. But the most simple way to think about it, because you think, "What are they doing? Why are they doing that?" And it feels like you're just in this fog of confusion. Think about, are they trying to avoid taking responsibility for what they've done? Yes or no? That's usually very, very, very simple. And when you think about what is a toxic relationship, to me, the definition of that is someone who has a prolonged pattern of avoiding taking responsibility for themselves. and getting you to do all the work of the relationship. That may mean everything is your fault. That may mean you're expected to pay for everything that they do. That may mean they get to control you and abuse you and throw things and whatever. That can take many, many forms, but it's a pattern of not playing by the same set of rules. They make the rules, they break the rules, and your job is to follow the rules, right? And that is no different when it comes to apology, because you try to confront them, you try to ask them, you try to solve something, to fix a problem with them, and they avoid the responsibility of themselves and taking responsibility for what they're doing in the relationship. So, there's that whole phrase like, keep it simple, stupid, or keep it simple, sweetheart, or whatever, that KISS method. And sometimes I really like kissing toxic people, but we need to think about keeping it as simple as possible, because when you go on that endless rabbit hole of narcissist research, which so many of you have done, and I understand it's a process we've all gone through. But if you get stuck in that and it makes it more complicated, then you talk about trauma bonding and codependency, and it's this build up and build up and build up of confusion. It's really hard to solve the problems of your life. It's really hard to actually fix your life. And isn't that what you want? You don't want to become an expert on toxic people. You want to become an expert in your own life. You want to become an expert in happiness. You want to become an expert in success. You want to become an expert in living the life that you want to live and being that person for your friends, for your kids, for the next woman who needs to watch you. So keep it as simple. Everything that I do is about trying to keep it as simple as possible. So in this case, break it down. They are trying to avoid responsibility and place the blame on you or confuse you. So even if they apologize, it's probably sneaky, because it is about getting you off their back rather than them actually doing the work of changing and improving themselves. Hope that helps.